Hey, welcome everybody. We are back for another week, and after a little bit of back and forth, we got schedules arranged, and I am really happy today to be joined by someone who's been in recruiting, so he's a man of my own heart. Everybody knows I love that. Coming from way north in Montreal, my first international guest here on the show,
Ooh.
but somebody who has talked a lot about the future of sales and where he sees it going, where he's been. He's been very honest and open about it. So Chris Cicconi, man, how are you today?
I am doing fantastically well. I'm super excited to chat with you, Dave, and I'm so sorry that I made you chase me around a little bit, but I promise I'll make
That's
it worth
all.
it. I'll make it
Hey,
worth
man,
it, I
the
promise.
chase is all part of it, right? The
There you
chase.
go.
No, you no. In all fairness, you're like, hey, Dave, I have 3 dates. I'm like, yeah, none of them work, right? Like, we'll try. Like, trust me, I was part of that dance as well, but I definitely wanted you on, and kind of like I said in the beginning, like when you and I were, just before we hit the record button here, I looked at really some of your stuff before I even DM'd you, and I was like, hey, I really resonate with this. And if it hits me, maybe it hits others out there. Right. And
Right on.
that's always how I reach out to folks going, hey, that's interesting to me. And you were in recruiting way back. Right. So, to me, you're always part of that little, that part of, you never lose it out of your blood. You're
At
always
all.
part of that, fraternity, if you will. So, but one of the topics you read or you talked a lot about that I read was it was in SDRs, and we'll start there. And
Sure.
you said, hey, if the role of SDR goes away, it's not because of AI, it's because of the leadership. So let's start there in terms of kind of what you meant by that and kind of your thoughts there.
I'm so happy that I've kind of moved on from the corporate world and sort of went out on my own and done stuff with Unicrn because the things I'm about to say will probably not be so kind to some leaders currently out there. But here's my thing, and this probably happened mostly, during the pandemic. Money was cheap. We can go and grab a bunch of junior folks and just get them to rip phone calls and send emails and book meetings. We'll get our high ticket closers that we're paying a bunch of money to. We're going to get them to do the work. And the problem becomes that these SDRs are undertrained, under-resourced. They don't have the tools, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the capabilities, and they're just expected to produce, right? Go make me 300 calls a day, go send 1,000 emails. Who cares what it looks like? Who cares how good it is? It doesn't really matter. We just need volume, and eventually some of this is going to work. And the thing is, being at the bottom of the totem pole, we all know the shit follows gravity typically. So what happens in a lot of worlds are you're taking people untrained, maybe don't have all the tools necessary, and they produce okay enough. Again, things were going well, money was cheap, people were buying stuff, things were going okay. But now we're booking a bunch of meetings. Those meetings, the quality is kind of like, eh. So AEs get on them and they can't close the deals and their close rate goes down and the goals get missed. And then what comes back around? Book more meetings. That'll solve the problem, right? Go do more, go do more. And I think that's where people weren't thinking critically about the role itself, right? It was throw bodies at the problem, throw volume at the problem, instead of saying, like, hey, why don't we give these people a chance? Why don't we put more emphasis on training them? Why don't we give them better tools? Why don't we actually think critically about how we're going to apply this? What does that handoff look like to the account executive? What do we really need to get a quality meeting in front of that AE or a quality prospect in front of the AE? So a lot of times I was a firm believer that like we could do less and get better results, but nobody wants to hear that. You tell leadership, I can book you half as many meetings, but they're going to be twice as qualified and we're going to waste less time and close more business. And that's turned and frowned upon because, like, well, we need pipeline numbers, we need meeting numbers because our board, our investors, or whoever is just, they're going to come down on us if we don't have those. So you kind of end up in this really weird spot where everything gets put on them, but they're the least equipped to handle it.
Has that been, the role of SDR is not new, right? BDR, SDR, I mean, it's not new. Is this, in your mind, has this been a case because of, the period of like zero interest rate and free money and such, or has this been a natural progression of just sales leadership in general and sales philosophy in general?
I think it comes down to a few things. I think the money being cheap helped or hindered in a lot of ways, right? Because it was easy to throw bodies at the problem. I think there was also the aspect of, and this is one thing I call out a lot when I post on LinkedIn or engage with folks, is sales has evolved, the industry has evolved, companies have evolved, how they buy has changed, and a lot of times what ends up happening is leadership is out of touch. You've got VPs of sales, you've got CROs who haven't actually sold end to end in 5 years, 10 years, maybe longer, right? You haven't made a cold call in 10 years, but you're going to say that you know what that BDR, that SDR needs to do? No. And things evolve, things change, but you're not evolving the process to get there. So I think that's a big aspect of it as well. And now with all the technology out there, with AI out there, with the way the industry is changing, like stuff's moving so quickly that things that worked 3 months ago don't work anymore. You used to have a runway like, hey, throughout the pandemic, we had like 2020 to 2022. If I put strategy out there, it kind of worked for the most part over that period of time. And now things are changing. Now they're moving faster. Now Google's shutting down your emails and you're not getting through. You're ending up in spam. Nobody's picking up their phone and they're fed up of people calling them. Like so much has changed. And I think that again, their SDRs and BDRs aren't given the tools or given the time to kind of catch up to where they're at. So I think there's a few things that play into it. But I think a big aspect of it now is there's so many more SDRs and BDRs out there. There's so much more volume out there, and the industry and how they buy has changed. Whether that's in part because people have been calling them 1,000 times a day and they're fed up of it and don't want to pick up their phone. So now they're doing their own thing, doing the research online, doing all that, or just naturally now there's so much more information out there. Like I don't need you to buy something. I can go, I can do all the research, and then I can just go like, hey, yeah, I want that one.
Yeah. So you're talking like, I mean, I come from, the SaaS world, and that's kind of where you're thinking right now. But in the world, the buyer journey is what I hear a lot of. And it's interesting to me because then I start thinking about like my buyer journey of how I buy things and how I do things. And I'm actually a little bit analytical, even though I was one semester of an engineer, and literally I couldn't even imagine, like, my entire family about once a year make fun of that, right? Like for some reason, they're like, could you imagine dad designing a road and the road would be all messed up, right? And the exits wouldn't match, right? Like I'm analytical to a point, but I'm not, I don't love it, right? But I do start getting into that analytical mode when I start, engineering the buying process and the view. Do you think that has changed forever? Do you think how we buy as in this sales cycle, and it could be software, it could be, consumer, it could be whatever. Do you think that's changed forever in terms of this stage?
Oh yeah, we're never going back, and it's only getting, I don't want to say worse because that's not the right term for it, but it's only going to continue to evolve. Like, you used to get to a point where, and I think back to like my retail days, and we're talking, whatever, gosh, 20 years ago or something. Like
Right.
I'm old now too. But like I'm thinking I used to work in a sports store. I have a love of shoes, if you can't tell from the shoe behind me. And people would come in, they're like, hey, I'm a runner. I want the newest Nike because I run in Nikes. That's my favorite brand. That's what I do. Maybe they picked up like a runner magazine and they flipped through it and be like, hey, I saw this new model. Do you have that? And then it was a lot like I had to have a lot of product knowledge to be able to say, like, hey, based on your running style, based on, how your foot lands, based on how much you weigh, how tall you are, how many kilometers you run, blah, blah, blah. Like, what is a good option for you? That has changed with, okay, now the internet exists. Now I can go and just be like, hey, I did my research. I want to try these two pairs on and see which ones I like best. And that, that applies to SaaS, that applies to buying a car, that applies to whatever. And the thing is, what I've learned moving into a leadership role in sales and being a buyer myself is like, man, if I have to meet with 5 vendors, that is incredibly time consuming because now I need to go through, and again, the sales process in some places is still broken where it's like I have to go through a discovery call to qualify myself. Then I have to go through a demo. Then they're going to send me 47 questions I need to answer in some Excel sheet somewhere. Then if I don't answer them immediately, I'm going to have 87 different follow-ups from all 5 of the reps. And then if I don't answer those, then their director or something will probably hit me up too. So like it is so time consuming to say I want to check out 5 vendors because we're not adjusting our sales process to the buyer's journey that like I don't want to do that. I want to go do my research. I'll come back to two of them and be like, Dave, Chris, hit me up. Let's talk through this. But like I don't want to go through that process. And now with AI, it's only gonna be worse. I can go into Chat GPT and be like, hey, I want to buy I need to buy whatever a CRM. Show me the top 5 CRMs from my industry. Okay, cool. Great. Now I know exactly what I need. Let me just go, ping one or two of them.
Where does the where does that relationship with your accounting executive, your business development, where does that relationship come in here? Because what you just defined was purely analytical. Look at specs. I have my three down. I know pluses and minuses. I may have to look at price. Where does the personal connection of me to you in person, Zoom, call it what you want, where does that come in? Where does, is it downplaying the importance of the AE now or the person going for that signature?
Boy, that's like a bit of a can of worms because I think two things play into it. Actually, I think it's mainly one thing. I'll start with that. People don't like salespeople. And as a salesperson, it's our fault a lot of the time because and this isn't a recent thing, right? Everybody assumes like and I mean no offense to anybody who works in car sales, but like if I walk into a dealership, I am expecting to get screwed. I'm expecting them to have to go to their manager 14 times to get me a discount, to also try and get me some weird warranty I don't need, and blah, blah, blah. I am expecting a salesperson to try and take advantage of me and charge me every last nickel and dime they possibly can to make the most off of me. That is what is kind of ingrained a lot of times in people's heads. Heck, I married my wife and we talk about, I think she'd be great in sales because she's a great relationship builder. And she's like, no, I wouldn't be good in sales. I'm not very good at lying. And I was
Oh,
like, but I've been in sales for like my entire life and you married me. Do you assume I just lie all the time? Like what's going on here? But like that's somebody who's married a salesperson. Can you imagine what the general
right.
public
That's the
probably
good
thinks of
comment.
salespeople?
That's the good version of the comment, right?
Right? So I
That's
think
pretty good.
yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge that people run into right now is like if I'm going to run into a salesperson, I'm assuming they're going to try and like in some way, shape, or form take advantage of me. So the relationship piece is still there. Like if you can actually be a trusted advisor for your client, you're absolutely going to expedite your ability to close a deal. The problem is you're starting at such a disadvantage, and now all that information is out there, so it makes it easier for a buyer to avoid the salesperson for a longer period of time, which means you have less of a chance to actually build that relationship now because you're not selling it over as long a period of time. They're showing up with the research done, just saying like, "Hey, I want to buy this thing," and then we still make them jump through hoops, so they still get frustrated about
No,
it.
I mean, I hear you, and I've been part of the team out there that made people jump through hoops. So I'm not immune to this. I didn't expect the conversation to go here, but I'm gonna take it. Are you familiar with like what Sarah Brazier and the team has, and I think Troy, I'm gonna get his name wrong, Bunsen with Demo, where they have all the software.
Yes.
Isn't that what we're talking about? Where I can go to a website and say, hey, I think they're up to like 150 technologies now and say, hey, look, I'm looking for X and Y, filter it down. Here are the 5 technologies. Basically, you get a 15, I think it's up to, I have to check it out myself, like 15, 20-minute demo. And I love the name demo, by the way. It's so on brand for them. And and then you go, oh, wait, so now I've seen the product. Not only have I done my research online, I've read the reviews, right? I've looked at G2. Now I've actually seen the product. Now I'm to the point of like, I mean, it's just one step closer to taking the element of the human interaction away in terms of the whole, sales process.
And it's so interesting, right? Because you're running into, I don't want to deal with the salesperson. Let's make it easier for me to buy. And then at the same time, you have the salesperson who's going, wait, how do I differentiate myself now when they're showing up being like, I like this thing, I've seen this thing, just like if I'm an order taker, then that changes what my job is, and that probably changes my compensation, and that changes my skill set, and that changes a whole lot of things.
Mhm.
But that's also starting to change outbound when you look at LinkedIn and you're looking at all these folks who are engaging and posting and the thought leaders in the space, let's say. they're all saying like, hey, going inbound or trying to adjust your methodology so you're bringing in more people who are maybe not straight up inbound. Maybe they're just hand raisers. They're, people who have seen a bit more, engaged a bit more. Like that's what we want now. We don't want you making 8,000 cold calls because 4% of the population is picking up and three out of that 4% is telling you get lost. So like, how do we make this easier? We do the
I,
more inbound stuff. How do we do
I'm
that? We do things like
amazed.
demo.
I talk to people all the time, and I'm amazed at how companies do not invest in teaching their employees. And I don't care if you're in marketing, recruiting, sales, CS, dev. I don't care. In my mind, it's your personal brand on LinkedIn can only help in terms of what your organization is doing, right? And I would drop if it's me, man, I want my employees doing this. I like put on your calendar, put on your calendar, block it off. Like I want to see, you can call it 10 minutes, you can call it, you can be on there for, like too long is too much. I get it. But I mean, to me, that's where people are going now, right? Like if I have a choice between a couple of things and I'm going to narrow this thing down to a couple of people, I'm probably going to look on, hey, I've seen Dave, I've seen, Chris on LinkedIn a little bit. Yeah, you know what? Oh, yeah. You know what? I'll include them in the mix, or I'll go to them first, or I'll give them a break when, when the price may not be exactly what I want. I mean, you work with a lot of different startups, a lot of different companies. Do you see this more? Is it talked about more, or is it still kind of in that gray area?
It's interesting. So, like, even, and I'm going to use Unicorn as an example where, I mean, the company's been around only for about 6, 7 months now. I joined it in April, and we do, essentially sales as a service. And so I jumped on board and I have a pretty decent following on LinkedIn and I started posting about it. And it's funny because a big part of what we talk about at Unicorn is like, how do we sell business for ourselves, right? Because we're too busy supporting our clients to kind of do our own thing at the same time. So when I can post on LinkedIn and then, oh, hey, look, I booked a meeting internal because somebody reached out to me saying, hey, Chris, I want to meet with you and learn more about it. Not only do, to your point, I start at an advantage because they're coming to me, but that also saves me a bunch of time because I'm doing that LinkedIn stuff anyway.
Mm,
And a lot of times with the founders we're engaging with, it's kind of 50-50. Some of them are very gung ho about like, I want to share my story. I want to talk. I want to get out there. I'm great with this. And the other half are like, that's not me. It's not what I want to do. That's not how I am. I don't feel the need or know what to post, what to do. So like even one of our clients right now that I'm working with, it's like, hey, we need to do this. We need to start somewhere. We need to get you out there because for startups, like the founder and their story and who they are is such a big part of what the company is. So like, let's start on LinkedIn, but let's also, can we go to events? Can we have you speak? Can we have you become a thought leader in the space? Because that's going to draw attention. So even from an outbound perspective, if I'm cold calling for that company, I go, hey, it's Chris calling from X. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know who that is. I saw Joe talk on stage last time I was at this event, or I see them on LinkedIn. It makes everything easier, not only from an inbound perspective, but from warming everything else up. So
yeah.
huge aspect of it for sure.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing, to this, and we'll take a piece here is that is video. Like everybody has said, well, Chat GPT can create it, and then it'll create 80%, and you add in your 20%, and it's still you. I'm not totally against it. I'm not totally for it, right? I think I personally haven't done it. I personally am like you from what I've read. I wake up and I go, what's on my mind? Right. What I don't plan my, post ahead of time. I don't plan it out and go, oh, that'd be great for a Thursday. And, oh, that's a weekend kind of post, or I don't do that. And maybe it's to my disadvantage, but to me, I just go, hey, what am I going to talk about today? Right. And then I go and then I, go from there. I have, and I am trying to do a little bit more with the Chat GPT thing. You always kind of had in the back of your head, hey, is that little comment, is that the AI thing? Is that, honestly, is that a virtual assistant thing? For me, a video, now it's me, right? There is no replacing it, not yet. I've heard it's coming, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you want to, I don't think anybody's going to say, oh, yeah, it's going to look like Dave. but let's do the video here. And I mean, some of my best and authentic engagement on LinkedIn has been from video, in terms of just, people getting to know me, and then, hopefully that translates into, I don't know, just getting to know them more is probably the best way to put it.
Totally, totally agree with you. I have one rule for my LinkedIn, and it goes against, what some of the quote unquote gurus say about it, where like you have to have an audience, you have a theme, and you're driving this home and you make X amount of posts to generate leads. Like, no, my one rule about LinkedIn is it is authentic. So
Mhm.
to your point, I wake up in the morning and go like, oh, this topic, and I'll post about it. And like, I didn't post anything today. Why? I didn't have anything to say, so I'm not going to. And some days three things come to mind. Yeah, like I'll set it up. So, oh, I'll post one later today and I'll set one for tomorrow morning and I'll schedule them just because, like, hey, if I'm actually getting good ideas, like let me jot them down. But I'm not one to ever, plan things out. I will say I do sometimes say like have weekend posts, because if I'm going to have something that is like not really business related whatsoever and just something completely out there, I'll
Yeah.
probably post it on a weekend.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, other
I
than
saw
that,
something you
just yeah.
did. Was it day in the life of, or the hell was it? I don't know. You head to the
I
window. Oh, it's in April, like in Montreal, like in April,
my
and you go to the window and it's like a blizzard, right? And I was like, that's perfect.
I like so that day was extra funny because it was a blizzard and we had actually lost power. So like I couldn't be super productive anyway. So I'm like, oh, I'll just fuck around for the first hour of my day and make this video. But for me, and I love video. Like I've done all kinds of hosting live events. I've done a lot of video stuff in my time, and I love it. But I also I sit on LinkedIn and I watch people post their like morning routine is I get up at 4 a.m. and I do my cold plunge, and then I run 8,000 miles, and then I do a headstand, I meditate, I write in my journal, and then I'm ready to go at like 11 o'clock. And like I don't understand it. Or you get a day in the life of like, dude, you work in software sales at home, you sit at your desk in your basement for 8 hours and you take the headset on and you take the headset off. Like it's not that interesting. You don't need to do it. So a lot of times too, like I'll throw a
I
video together because I can't sometimes. It's a bit much.
I was gonna do a parody of it, of like me coming out of my bedroom, walking literally 22 feet through the door, right, coming here, like maybe answering a few phone calls and getting up and walking out of the door, right, like 5 p.m. I still may, but like I know there's a few names that come to my mind, and I'm sure they're good people, but the videos always make me laugh, right? I mean, I'm like, all right, enough. All right, we're winding down a little bit, but you commented on a few things I'm gonna
Yeah.
hit here at the end, right? I don't even know where we are, but time has flown by here with me. Um, you said in one of your things, you said, "Hey, you don't need to start a company. You can join a company as a side hustle." And what you just mentioned was in hosting some stuff, your relationship with esports and your involvement with
Mm.
esports. Talk on that. That's super interesting to me. It's not related to sales. If you want to end the podcast here, have at it. But like, I seriously want to know about this.
So it's interesting because it was somewhat about sales and it taught me a lot about branding. And basically what happened was during the so you mentioned I was in recruiting. I had spent 10 years selling recruiting services essentially, and that was all in person. It was all local Montreal. I was literally driving around, meeting clients, shaking hands, kissing babies, all that good stuff. Then I made the move to SaaS, and it was still like we were a small Montreal-based startup, so a lot of our clientele was still local. We did, probably about 75% clients I could drive to go see, 25% was the Zoom calls and all that. So it wasn't a big deal. And then I got to the point where like, hey, pandemic happens and all of a sudden we're 100% talking to a screen. I was like, I never did that before, really. So it's like, well, how do I start to make that adjustment? And I got some extra time because I'm sitting in my office doing nothing, because can't leave the house. And I have a buddy of mine who actually is an esports host as a career. That's what he does, and he's done virtual stuff, he's done in person stuff, all kinds of things. But he was like streaming on Twitch and doing all that, and I was like, hey, I need to practice. I'm a kind of a big nerd from like the Mario thing you see behind me, and so like, how can I bridge the gap there and get practice talking to a camera, which translates to sales? How do I captivate an audience? How do I keep them engaged? And the esports stuff is really interesting because you don't actually have a physical audience. They're not responding to you. You're literally talking to a camera and you're just hoping people don't hate you. And like it's the internet, so most people will hate you. But
Tell me about. I've seen my
uh,
comments on my post. Trust me. I mean, I'm right there with you.
yeah, so he introduced me to his buddy who 93 Media, Mark Gibson. He owns basically a production company. They do esports, they do like video game related podcasts, all that kind of stuff. So I started to do a few events with them. I was the permanent, or I still am the permanent host for Cards, which is a World War II virtual card game. They're ones I work with regularly. They're based in Iceland, actually. So their world championship is in Iceland. So I got to go to Iceland a couple times, which was really cool. I've hosted podcasts for them and stuff. So it was just really great practice to be able to like learn to talk to a camera, learn to talk to nobody essentially and be engaging and do all that. I learned a lot about, the technology involved, making sure you have a good mic, making sure you have a good camera, because all of that plays into how people perceive you and see you. And then from a branding perspective as well, right? I was selling myself. It's like, how do I go and get more gigs? How do I go and get more work? Because again, it's like paid based on the what you're doing. So like, right, I have to brand myself. I have to go out. Like I had a YouTube channel showing some of my highlights and that. I was using Twitter a bit more to again showcase like what I was doing, what events I was doing, what was coming up. So that was kind of the beginning stages. And then I said, well, wait a second, I can take some of what I'm learning here and apply that to work. And I started doing videos on LinkedIn. And I would
Nice.
do like a video a week. And then I was like, well, shit, this is taking up a lot of time. What if I just post on LinkedIn too? And that's how I kind of ramped up my activity. But like it all kind of came full circle, which is neat. And I still get to, from time to time make a couple bucks talking about video games, whether it's a podcast or an event or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of how it all evolved, but it
That's
was all tied together.
that's awesome, man. Like it's I saw that, and I think I've told this story here, but this also goes into parent of the year category as well, right? So when we were pre-pandemic, son was in this he was in like the year round, so he's out, we're at work,
Mm,
right? So he was, I don't know, 15 or something. He got into NBA 2K and just
mm,
started balling, right? So he comes down one day. I think he's like 15 and a half, heading to 16. He's like, hey, dad, I get this strange email. I'm like, oh, it's a scam email. It's whatever. And I look at it and it's from like Microsoft or something, or it's from the 2K.
yeah.
And it says, hey, you're identified as one of the top 200 players. We'd like to select you to be, possibly in the draft for that. ESPN was carrying the 2K on,
Right.
TV and the whole league. I was like, this is nonsense. He goes, well, no, I'm pretty good. And I go, all right, sure. My wife's looking at me like, what's going on? Did you give any money away? I'm like, I don't know. Like, hang on, right? He go up and he shows me the record. And he's like, I don't know, 302 and 5 or something like something stupid. I
Yeah.
go, how much have you played this? And he goes, yeah. So over my break, I'm like, dear God, right? So I'm like, yo, bro. I'm like, I don't know. He's like, so he responded back to him. He goes, yeah, I guess, but I'm also 16 or 15, whatever it was. And they're like, yeah, sorry, you're not 18. So there's also a running joke of me being an engineer. There's also a running joke of I'm like, look, man, if your marketing thing doesn't work out, just go roll up in the esports league, right? And just, go ball, so
Dude, there's money in that. Even one of the games I was casting, their like prize pool for the year was $1 million.
yeah,
And like break
yeah,
that down over, it was like 6 tournaments or something, plus a world championship. Like
right.
people made a
Right.
very livable salary
Well,
playing a
seriously,
card game.
I joke about it. I'm like, well, I'm not sure I'm joking anymore. I'm like, maybe, I'm like, I'm like, again, mom would probably kill me, right? But we're gonna just leave that. He's like, hey, dad. I'm like, don't tell mom. Like, we'll like, don't tell, right? So, all right. Well, look, this has been stupid fun, right? Like, I think, your stuff on LinkedIn, and if you're not following Chris, right, please do. Like, your videos are funny. I think your thoughts are genuine. I've had enough people here, and I think I've read enough LinkedIn posts where I can tell if they're genuine or not, honestly. And I think just by looking at your post, like, I think you're authentic. Like, you posted about, hey, look, I want to get back in shape. It's Christmas, and it was pretty damn funny, by the way. I had to give you props. I'm doing it tomorrow. I was like, because today I'm eating Chinese or so. I was like,
Oh yeah. I
I
remember
was like,
that
dude, that's funny. That's so me. I'm like, yeah, I'm in this tomorrow, but
tomorrow.
not right now, right? So if you're not following Chris, please do. And Chris, man, I'd love to have you back. I think
Totally.
as you look at what the sales and our profession and this industry does, to hear your voice on it every 6, 7 months, man, I'd love to have you here. And we'll get into the expos, we'll get into the weather up there in like the winter, right? We can talk your Nikes, right? And your Jordans, right? Like we can talk all that next time, I promise.
Right on. Next time around, then I'll wear the I'll rock the Expos cap. We'll
I
be all
know.
set.
I saw the Expos cap. I was like, dude, that's my guy. I was like, I saw that video. I was like, that's my guy. I was like, we're gonna hit it off, not a problem. All right. Well, thank you
Awesome.
again. To everybody else, man, great episode. I couldn't thank Chris enough. Thank you for listening. We're back next week, and I'm off to go edit. Later, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Dave.